Hey, so hello everyone. My name's Cameron. We've all probably spoken to one another at some point, I guess. And today we're going to be covering the Touch Pureflex. So we're going to be looking at different parts of the Touch Pureflex ultimately. So we're going to be looking at designing one in the configurator, installing one, and then we're going to be going into configuring it in Loxone config. If you've been living under a rock for the past 6 months and you're not sure what the Touch Pureflex is, this is what it looks like. Ultimately, it's like the Touch Pure, but each icon is freely configurable. So you could have any icon, any engraving you like in a few different templates, in a few different formats. So let's get straight into the configurator, I guess. Please do use the chat if you've got any questions or the Q&A thing, and I will answer as many questions as possible. Perfect, let's go. So firstly, I'm going to head over into the configurator and we're going to start designing a Touch Pureflex. Now, when you get started with designing a Touch Pureflex, the first thing you want to do is actually close the configurator, because when you're designing a Touch Pureflex, you don't want to be designing the room that the Touch Pureflex is going to be going in based on the design of the flex, if that makes any sense at all. You want to be designing the Touch Pureflex based on the technology that is already in that room, or what is intended to go in that room. So I would recommend starting with a whiteboard, because I can't print a whiteboard onto my screen very easily, because technology, I mean, it's probably available, but technology is not there yet on my computer. The first thing I'm going to do is open up a notepad, and on that notepad I'm going to list out the different technologies that are going to be in the room that I want to control. So this isn't necessarily going to be for every single installation out there. The Touch Pureflex is unique in the fact that it's primarily designed for the likes of hospitality projects and commercial projects, where the Touch Pure and the normal touch doesn't just quite work. So for example, in a hotel room, if you went into a hotel room, you don't want to be learning how a touch operates. You want to just get straight in, turn the lights on, close the blinds, and just get into bed. And it needs to be clear and simple for you to use. And then you've also got the other side, where you've got potentially a room that has got multiple different technologies, multiple different purposes that, again, a Touch Pure wouldn't necessarily work as well. A Touch Pureflex is better suited. Perhaps before the Touch Pureflex, you would require something like a tablet or an iPad in that room to be able to control it previously. So I'm going to give a couple of examples, and we see how we go. And if we want to cover any more, we certainly can. And as I said, please use the chat and the Q&A if you have any questions. So the first option I'm going to go for is one that's more residential focused, which is in a living room. Now, the technology that we're going to have in a living room is, of course, lighting. Now, I'm going to have the general lighting of the room, perhaps some spots, whether they be Loxone spots or dimmable spots or switch spots, that's up to you. But we're going to have some spots, perhaps some LED strip, whether that be in a shadow gap in the ceiling or around the TV. And then we're also going to have like a table lamp or a floor standing lamp. Now, from personal experience in my living room, I use the lamp occasionally, and it's not frequent enough for it to be within my lighting mood. It's something that I use once in a blue moon. So perhaps a specific button on the Touch Pureflex would be good for this. So we're going to have another one called lamp, and we'll have a different icon for the lamp. And then of course I'm going to want to adjust the temperature in the room. I've got some blinds, and I've got audio in my living room. Of course, I have a TV because I'm a normal human being with a TV in my living room. And these are the main technologies that I've got. Now, as I've discussed, we've got the lighting icon, we've got the lamp icon, temperature icon, blinds, audio, and TV. Now with blinds, is why one icon enough? On the normal Touch Pure, have I got one here? Yes, I do. So on the normal Touch Pure, we've got just the left-hand side, a button for open and a button for close. Now, that's two buttons that you need as standard. So is one button enough? Well, yes, definitely. With the Touch Pure Flex, you've got your arrows on the device, as you can see here in the examples I've got on the screen. So this means that one button is enough because I could just tap blinds, blinds open, or blinds close. Now for audio, you can't really control audio with just one button because there's so many different elements that you're going to be controlling with audio, whether that be just playing and pausing, which again could be two icons, or you could just have a play pause icon. Volume, again, could be two icons. And then you're potentially going to want to cycle between your room favorites. So I think we can probably start off with three icons there: play pause, volume, and then cycling through your favorite playlists. So let's get rid of audio for a moment and put volume, play pause, and then playlist / favorite. So here we've got 8 different icons. So let's see how we get how we get on with these 8 icons. We can choose a layout of the Touch Pure Flex, and then we can add the icons. So to configure a Touch Pure Flex, you want to go to configurator.loxone.com. So what I'll do is I'll just pop this in the chat. So if anyone is following along, you are welcome to configure one yourself. I would definitely recommend that you log into the configurator before you get started, just so that your designs are indeed saved to your account. And that's a great start. Here we go. So configurator. So with the configurator, once it loads, you can see I've got my previous configurations. We've got some default Loxone templates, which we've got meeting rooms, a couple of doorbell examples, hotel, and then at the bottom you can start from scratch. Now these are the different layouts that you can start off with. So my personal favorite is the 3x3 grid, where you can have 9 different icons, but depending on the room, you're going to be choosing a different layout, different template, and we'll be using a different one for my meeting room example a little bit later on. So for the living room, we're going to go for the 3x3 grid. And as a starting point, you just need to choose the variant. So whether that's going to be tree or air, white or anthracite. So I'm going to go for white and tree for the to start off with. And you just need to give it a description, because of course, once you've got loads of different designs on your configurator, it will be easier for you to find. Oh, there's Nico trying to interrupt the webinar. So living room, and we'll just call it webinar. There we go. So once you've got your template, once you're into the configurator, I'll explain how it looks. So on the left-hand side, you've got your symbol library, as you can see. In the middle, this is your preview of what you've designed, and the right-hand side is the settings for each icon. So just heading back to our notepad for a second, we've got lighting and lamp. So let's find the icons that we're going to need for this. So I'm just going to go into search, lighting. So I think a light bulb probably works for lighting. And then, of course, I've got that table lamp or that floor standing lamp. So I'm going to go for this one here for my floor standing lamp. And then what else have we got? We've got temperature. So if we just search in here, so we've got heating. Now this will show me things like radiators and valve actuators and heat pumps, but I want one that's specific to temperature. So I think just the standard temperature icon is probably quite a good start. We'll get onto why in a moment. We've got some green icons and some gray icons next to our next to the pictures that we were adding. So we've got lighting, temperature, blinds. Now for blinds, as I said before, you could use an icon for blinds up and an icon for blinds down. However, you've got the arrows, and these arrows are there for the intended purpose that you can click on an icon, move them up and down like volume and opening and closing things. So I'm a personal fan of the icon with the two arrows showing you that this both opens and closes the blinds. However, if you wanted to go for a different option, you are more than welcome to. And then we've got volume, playlist, play, pause, and TV. So I'm going to put the audio stuff on the right-hand side, just because naturally from being used to the Touch Pure, I'm used to going to the right-hand side for controlling my audio. So if we search for music, you can see, firstly, it brings up like playlist related icons. So we've got here, I think this one would be quite good for choosing a playlist. And then I want to control my volume. So there we go, volume, and then play, pause. Now, the one thing to think about when you're creating your Touch Pureflex design is you're of course going to be interacting with it in a similar way each time. So when I first approach the switch, and if I want to control the music, what is the first thing I want to do when controlling music from the switch? And in my case, that's controlling whether it's playing or whether I'm pausing the music. So that's why I put that in the top right-hand corner. Then next, it's usually adjusting the volume to a comfortable level. And I may be changing the volume multiple times in the session of me listening to music. And then we've got the playlist icon. Okay, so then the last icon that I had on my list is TV. So for TV, we'll just grab this icon here. And all of these icons are very self-explanatory. So I would personally say you don't need text for any of these icons. It's a bit like when you are watching a movie and there's subtitles, you're naturally drawn to the subtitles. So if I was putting text on here, naturally your eyes go to the text rather than the icon. And ultimately that icon is what's going to tell you in more detail what the lights are actually, what that icon is actually doing. So it's just one thing to bear in mind when you're configuring a Touch Pureflex is, do you really need text? Now, I'm happy with this design in the fact that we've got our icons that we planned for, but I've seen this already on a couple of designs that have been ordered, and it's one thing that you should definitely not do is have a blank space on here. Now, it's really important that we aren't falling into the trap of filling icon space just because we have to. If you get to that point, choose another template. Maybe a 2x6 grid is better than a 3x3 grid for you. But in my case here, there's one icon that I'm missing, which is really, really important. And that is an all-off icon. And the reason why an all-off icon is really important is because although you can double tap the icon like you would for the Touch Pure, so when you double tap it, it would turn the lights off. It's actually really difficult on the Touch Pureflex. If I just flick the camera over to my other one, with the Touch Pureflex, it's quite difficult when it's on a wall to go up to it and just double tap it exactly on that icon. So what we recommend is having a specific icon for all off. So all I'm going to do here is just have an icon, a power icon. It's really self-explanatory, but just going to put a bit of text there to say all off. So that will then turn all of the functions in that room off, like the music, the lights, and the TV if necessary. Kadron, you just asked, can the icons illuminate? The Touch Pureflex in Anthracite, there is a fluorescent option. which allows you to which allows it to glow in the dark essentially when it's dark. But there isn't like a backlight version as you would with like the NFC code touch. There is, however, on the left-hand side, little LEDs, which we'll be using a little bit later for our TV icon. So we've done our design, which I'm quite happy with this design. And I just need to go through now the different function between each icon. So the green on the next to the icon, this means that there is a predefined function behind that icon. So if I click on the light bulb, for an example, you can see if I head over to the left-hand side, you can see the API command for this lighting icon is setting the lighting controller to pulse the M+ input. So just to quickly bring you that back to what that really is, on the lighting controller in config, you've got the M+ input. So all it's doing is pulsing that input, which will go to the next mood. And then it's waiting 500 milliseconds, and then it's starting a menu function, which is showing the lighting controller mood. So this then means that on the display down here, it doesn't always say Loxone. It will give you a reading of what the currently active mood is, and then allows you to use the arrows to cycle through them, so up and down. Now, this one here, this is the icon for our floor lamp. Now, with this one, you can see that it's setting a T5 function, being the T5 3 pulse. So it's going to be connected to the lighting controller, and it's going to be triggering T5 3. So again, you can see here, T5 3. Now, in my case, I've got a lamp, and I've got a specific mood named lamp, which is only mixing in the lamp being on for any of the other moods. So in none of the other moods other than bright does the lamp come on. So I would just like to mix the lamp in to the currently active mood. Now, you could do this in several different ways. So let's have a look at whether we can create a custom command specifically for that purpose. So if I click on the settings gear icon, I can choose the function block we're working with, which is the lighting controller in our case. And then we're choosing the input, which in our case is the T5 4 input, which is our lamp mood. And we need to set, and we just want to send a pulse. So we just want to pulse that one input. So we just need to type in pulse. And you can see here in the value, it says which type of command you can send. You can send pulse, which is how a normal tap works, or a constant on or a constant off signal. But in our case, it's just pulse. So we've then reworked how this is going to work. Now, for the TV icon, this icon here is also got a predefined function, because generally with the TV, it's going to be controlling multimedia. Now, for the TV icon, I'm only wanting to toggle the TV on and toggle the TV off. I'm not going to be choosing the volume of the TV and the different channels that are playing on the TV. This is only going to be used for turning it on and off. So in which case, I could put some text here for on and off, just to show what it's doing. I could use the little LED underneath it to show whether the TV is on or off. But the API command is not actually needed. All I want is the input from the Touch Pureflex for triggering the TV to be on and off. And I'm going to be using the IR control air for turning the TV on and off. Now, when it comes to temperature, this icon in particular, the thermometer icon, doesn't actually have a predefined function, so you need to configure it yourself. Now, depending on what you would like this icon to do, there are a few different options. So again, if we go to the right-hand side, predefined functions, we're going to be controlling the intelligent room controller. So again, we can scroll down and find the intelligent room controller, and we can set temperature, or we can use it to just go up in increments for the temperature. So we just want to set the temperature. And you can see straight away, it populates the function, and there's quite a few different pieces to this command. So firstly, we're setting the intelligent room controller to mode 3. So mode 3 on the intelligent room controller, as you can see in the documentation, is a fixed set point. So it's adjusting the target temperature, and that can be both heating or cooling. So it's just a fixed set point. And then we're allowing the user to select a value between a different range. Now, ultimately, we're selecting a value for this particular input here, this particular parameter, and that is the target temperature input. So theta T. So theta T is target temperature, which you can see just here. And what this is then saying is that the value select range is between 16 degrees Celsius and 28 degrees Celsius. So the customer will never, or the user will never be able to go above 28 degrees or below 16 degrees. And the value select range, when you're using the arrows, will go up in increments of 0.5 degree Celsius, which is exactly how the intelligent room controller works. So you can set up to 0.5 degree increments straight from the Touch Pureflex. And you'll notice that we don't need to change any of the display text or the arrows, because the command itself is dictating that for us. Okay, moving on to shading. Now for shading, there is really nothing we really need to do. And the reason being is that when you tap the icon, it will pulse the toggle input on the automatic shading function block. And all that toggle input will do is just open and close the blinds. So again, I'll show you the input. The toggle input, we'll get a brief description of it. So toggles between open, stop, and close for single button control. But of course, in our case, we've got arrows as well. So when you press the button, it will echo. So on the display, it will display the current state of the automatic shading block. And then you've got your arrows, which aren't defined by the button command or the display text. The arrows, so when you press the down arrow, it will pulse the complete close input, and with the up arrow, the complete open arrow. And each time when you press the arrows, when you are in the blind operating state, it will always echo back to you. It will always show back to you on the display what the automatic shading block is doing. We'll come back to the all off button in just a moment. We'll just head back over to the audio. So starting with play and pause. The audio player function block recently brought out a play and pause function specifically for the Touch Pureflex. So you can have one button to play and pause. And when you press play, it will display text being play. And when you press it again, it will display stop. So you've stopped the music. Now, so very self-explanatory. Now for the volume icon, you can see for this particular icon, when you tap it, it will toggle the volume up, but also give you the option with the arrows to bring the volume up and down. Now, for the volume up and down, you can actually change this so that it's not always going to bring the volume up as soon as you press it for you to then just bring it down. We can change it so it's selecting between a value range. So let's go to the settings icon. Again, we're still controlling the audio player, but this time, rather than controlling the input volume up, we can choose the input set volume. And you can see on this case, we're not setting a volume, we're selecting a volume from the display. So ultimately, we don't need to set a value. We don't need to be starting with a certain value because we need to take whatever volume is currently already active. So we can leave that blank. We can then go for the minimum value. Of course, the minimum value for volume is 0 and the maximum value is 100. And the step size, just like you do with the normal Touch Pure, is, for example, 3. And then the unit, it could be blank or it could be a percentage. And then press save. And finally, for audio, you've got the playlist icon, and the playlist icon you can see here is giving you the menu option to toggle through the favorite input on the audio player. So we've had a few questions come through. So Adrian, can you do dimming up and down with the arrows for a scene? Yes, we can. We can have a look at that shortly. Aaron, once a switch has been ordered, can config for each button be changed to a later date, but symbols can't? Yes, of course. So the only thing which is locked in once you place the order is the symbols. So the symbol position and the symbol itself cannot be changed, but the functionality behind it can 100% be adjusted at any point, whether you've installed it already or whether you are just about to install it, you can still change the configuration. Cadron, there are 3 action settings for the Flex. What is the difference between pulse and on? So pulse is simply just a quick on and off. So just quickly toggling that input on and off. And then on is just keeping that input permanently on until you release it. So it's a bit like with a conventional light switch, just keeping it permanently on and then taking it off again. And then of course with off, it's just keeping the input off. Dave, can you set a button to be multifunctional, e.g. push the temperature button, display shows the temperature 20 degrees, and then push up and down to adjust, then display minutes or how long the override is active and ability to use up and down? Oh, it's a good question. So push the temperature button to display the temperature. Yes, you can do that. So that would be an echo command. So you're echoing the current state of the intelligent room controller. And then using the up and down buttons to adjust the temperature. Yep, you can do that. So that's when you're going into value select. And then display shows minutes of how long the override is active. So displaying how long the override is active is not, I'm not sure whether you can do that without trying it. Maybe one for us to do over TeamViewer perhaps. But on the, what we have to bear in mind is we are pulling information from the function block directly. And so you can see when we're controlling it and when we're pulling information from the Touch Pure Flex, we're using the inputs, the parameters, and the outputs to pull information. You can see there isn't an output on the intelligent room controller to tell you how long the timer has got left. This is something that will only be shown in the user interface, to my knowledge. Okay, cool. So let's head back to the design. Now, the last one I want to look at is the all off icon. Now, the all off icon, I want to press it and it does exactly what it says on the tin, turn off the lights, turn off the audio, and turn off the TV. That is primarily the main thing I want it to do. Now, I could do this in a couple of different ways. Firstly, I could just do exactly what I've done with the TV icon, is just have it as an input in Loxone config, and I'll show you what that will look like shortly, exactly like you do with the normal Touch Pure. Or I could build a string of commands for it to toggle the all of these function blocks off. So let's start with getting rid of the existing commands, and we'll start building them. So the button for API command will start with lighting. So if we go down to the lighting controller, it'd be good if I can see the lighting controller. I'm blind. There it is, lighting controller. The input we're going to use is the off input, and we're just going to set a pulse. Save. So the lighting controller is going to receive an off pulse. Now, remember that when you pulse off on the lighting controller, it will turn the lights off, of course. But one thing I need to refresh, yeah, there you go. So when you pulse off, it will also send a pulse out of the double click on the lighting controller. So if you've used auto config, you should have the memory flag leaving room. Oh, be good if I connected this properly. There we go. So we've got the leaving room memory flag. And we can connect this to the off on our audio player. And then all we need to do is trigger the off input on the lighting controller, and that will automatically turn off my audio player, my lighting, and then what I can do is turn off my TV as well. So of course, I've already got my TV remote power trigger. So I could just trigger that. When I leave the room, it always toggles the TV off. We'll do a little bit of extra config for that anyway, because we want to see whether the TV is on or off still before we actually trigger the off command. So every time we leave the room, we're turning the TV off. Now that is one way of doing it. However, you could build multiple commands together. So what we could do is we put an ampersand in there, an and symbol, and then we could say set AP for audio player, semicolon, off, semicolon, pulse, close brackets. And that will then send both the pulse to the lighting controller and the pulse to the audio player from just one click of a button, because the lighting controller knows it should only listen to this section and the audio player knows it should only listen to this section, with very little extra logic. And you can see here, exactly like we've done with the lighting controller, we've got three commands strung together. And that's exactly what we're doing here. We're stringing three commands together. However, the one thing to bear in mind is, of course, the TV turning off. The TV turning off is not currently within a function block. So I cannot call it within the Touch Pureflex. So that's where you've got to make the decision whether you are stringing commands together and using it as an input, or whether you are only using it as input, or you are going to put it all on a function block together. So it's just one thing you need to bear in mind. In my case, I'm going to do both. So I'm going to string these two commands together to turn off my lighting controller and my audio player, and I will use the input separately in config for my TV. Okay, let's just get rid of this because I've already got the command strung together. There we go. So this is our first option for our living room. Now, in terms of the overall settings of the Touch Pureflex, you can decide whether you show or hide the arrow buttons. I would always keep the arrow buttons unless you've got other arrow buttons somewhere else on the display, or you'll simply never need them. But it's always better to have them than not have them. Then you can change your symbol sizes. So if you want to increase the symbol size, you can. And of course, you can increase the text size where necessary. Ultimately, you'll need to make sure you have enough space for increasing the text size. And you can, of course, change the text weight as well, as if you were writing a Word document. Okay, so this is the design of our Touch Pureflex. You can then go ahead and order it, and it will be shipped to you within 3 to 4 weeks. Now, I'm going to copy this config ID from the Touch Pureflex. When you order a Touch Pureflex, it will actually be adopted at manufacturing. So when the Touch Pureflex is actually produced, you can even see on the back, as well as the serial number, it's got the config ID. So when you pair it into Loxone config, pair it into your mini server, it will automatically pull the correct commands down from the configurator. So let's jump into Loxone config and configure it for our living room. So here is one I prepared earlier. Let's find a Touch Pureflex that I added. And then if I was going to pair this Touch Pureflex that I've actually designed, I could search for it and I could pair it into Loxone config. But in my case, because I don't have the Touch Pureflex yet, because although our manufacturing team are great, they can't manufacture it that quickly for me. I can just enter the configuration ID manually myself. There we go. So I'll just paste it in there. And you can see already it's pulled the configuration into Loxone config. Now, of course, this does require an internet connection, but if you are on site and you don't have an internet connection when you're commissioning them, you can download the JSON file from the configurator. How you do it off the top of my head, haven't a Scooby. Let's have a look. Oh yeah, here you go. You can press download and that will download the JSON file onto your computer that you can upload into Loxone config. And then here within the function, within the Touch Pureflex configurator in Loxone config, you can actually see that you can make further adjustments in Loxone config later on. One thing to bear in mind is that if you make a change in Loxone config and then press update from online configurator, that change is gone. It's no longer going to be available within your Loxone config file. However, if you make a change within your configurator design online, and then you go into Loxone config and press update from online configurator, that will be brought into Loxone config. So if you are making changes to a design at a later date, I would recommend doing it from the configurator on the website. It's a bit of an easier interface to work with as well. Whereas in Loxone config, there is no way of saving that for a later date. So the only way you'll be able to do this as well is that if you designed the Touch Pureflex on your account, you are the only one that would be able to edit it online later on. So this is just a consideration to make if your customer made the design, for example. Now, there's nothing I need to change because, of course, I did it in the online configurator earlier. And I just now need to connect this to my function blocks. So rather than having a list of inputs or the normal T5 input that you guys are all familiar with, we just have the API connector. I just grab the API connector, drop it on the lighting controller, drop it on my intelligent room controller, my audio player, automatic shading, and all of those functions will immediately start happening. And we'll have a look at it as an example in just a moment. And then we've got our TV. So we need to turn the TV on and off. So for turning the TV on and off, we're going to be using this input here, which I didn't name very well. And I'm going to be using this input here, which again, I didn't name very well. So this input here is going to be the TV icon that's on my Touch Pureflex. And this icon, so input 8 is going to be the icon for turning everything off. Now, turning everything off will already happen based on the API command I built into the icon. But just for turning the TV on and off, I will need the input manually myself. So the smart socket is giving me power, and we've got our relay constantly keeping that on. So I need to be using a memory flag to know when that TV is on. So when the TV is on, there we go. So when the TV is on, and we get a pulse from the TV icon, then we will send a command to the input. In fact, actually, that is only relevant for turning it off. If the TV is on and we send the off command, we turn it off. But if the TV is already off, we don't need to send another command. But the power toggle, we of course do want to do. We do want to have it so that it's always going to be toggling the TV on and off. Remember as well, we've got the LEDs on the Touch Pureflex, and underneath the TV icon, I've got one that I can use. So I'm just going to connect LED 3 to the threshold switch that I've got here. So when the TV is actually on and consuming above 45 watts, that will give me an LED on the Touch Pureflex to show the TV is currently on. Now, of course, if you're not blind, you'll be able to see the TV's on anyway, but it's a cool little feature. Perfect. So that is how you configure and install a Touch Pureflex. So we configured it and then installing it into Loxone config. Now let's see if I can trick it into thinking that my design that we've just created is on the Touch Pureflex that's next to me. So the Touch Pureflex that's next to me is actually here. So I'm going to copy that serial number and delete it. And then find the Touch Pureflex we've just been playing with, save into the mini server, and let's hope that the design that I've just made will be forced onto this one. Has that got the same command? Yep. Let's just double check the configuration. Yep, perfect. So we've saved into the mini server, and let's now have a look to see how it behaves. So I'll just go to living room and let's move the camera across. So hopefully everyone should be able to see both the camera and my display. So you can see starting off, we are looking at our Touch Pureflex. Now, on our Touch Pureflex design, I'll bring up the other screen as well, just so you can see the design and my Loxone app. So you can see I've got my lighting icon in the top left-hand corner. So if I press this, you can see here, it's toggling through my lighting moods. So just simply tapping the icon, and you can see here it's reading me back on the display what mood is currently active. And then I can use the arrows to toggle between them, like so. Now, underneath, I've got my lamp icon. So if I tap that, nothing happens. So I've done something wrong there. There we go. That's a good start. So we'll go back and have a look to why that's happened in just a moment. So my lamp icon doesn't seem to be mixing in. So we'll come and have a look at why that is in shortly. Let's start live view. And you can see when I press the TV icon, I can then trigger my TV from going on and off. And then let's have a look at the temperature icon now. So when I press the temperature icon, you can see it shows me what currently the intelligent room controller is doing, which is 21 degrees. And then I can bring the set point down, which of course is reflected in the Loxone app immediately. And I can increase it as well. So that is the temperature icon. We've then got our shading icon. If I just press this, it's going to begin bringing my blinds down. Press it again, it will stop. Press it again, it will open. And then of course I can use the arrows. So I can bring the blinds down. I could bring them back up again using the arrows on the Touch Pureflex. Then of course we've got our play and pause icon, which will begin playing music. Of course, if I've got anything previously playing, it would begin playing the music. I can then change the volume, which you can see here on my display. is moving in increments of 3. And you can see compress and hold as well for the volume to decrease as well. So we have more than just tapping and press and hold. And then of course we've got our favorites. And at the moment we're going between favorite 0 and no other favorites because I've got nothing else selected at the moment. But if I did have favorites saved on my audio player, I would be able to cycle through them on the Touch Pureflex. And you can see when it goes into idle mode, when presence is active, it will cycle between the temperature, the current time, and the humidity in the room. Now, to customize what is displayed on the Touch Pureflex when it's idle, you can just have a look at time, temperature, humidity, and custom display text all here in Loxone config. So if I wanted to get rid of time, but keep, for example, temperature and humidity, I can do exactly that and just save into the mini server and it will reflect immediately on the Touch Pureflex. Okay, so any questions up to this point, or shall I move on to the next design? Okay, we'll move on to the next design. So for the next design, we're going to do a meeting room, so something a bit more commercial focused. So in a meeting room, we're going to have a few of the similar things, but we are also going to have some additional functions as well. So in a meeting room, we're going to have lighting. We're going to have temperature control. In a meeting room, it might be a larger space, a bit like the room that I'm in at the moment. So we might have 2 blinds. We may also have some curtains. We're of course going to have audio, which of course will have our 3 functions. You could have a TV, but in my case, I haven't got one in there. I've just got 2 operating modes that I want to toggle between, which is meeting and presentation. And of course, as I discussed already, all off. So let's create the design for this. Here we go. So let's head over into the configurator. I probably should go back. There we go. Now this time, I'm going to need a bit more text because on this one, I'm going to be having a presentation and a meeting mode. Now from experience, I can already tell you that presentation, the text presentation, will not fit in the normal 3x3 grid. And that is why we have the other 3x3 grid, which has got a larger middle section. So we can just click on that. We'll go for the variant being a Touch Pureflex anthracite this time, and we'll call this meeting room webinar. There we go. So again, like before, we'll go for lighting. Temperature. I think I've made a mistake somewhere because I've counted 10 functions here. What should we get rid of in this occasion? Let's get rid of playlist for this example. So because I've got 10 functions instead of 9, we're getting rid of playlist. So for here, we're going to have an icon for perhaps curtains. So we can go for a nice icon for curtains. This one's quite good. We can then do presentation. So presentation, I think this icon's quite good for presentation. We've then got meeting. So people having a conversation. Our all off button. Our blinds. And of course, play pause and volume. So you all get the idea of the positioning of icons now. So it's just important that you lay it out in a way that you can use easily. And if you have got multiple touch Pureflexes around a building, I would try and follow a uniformed design. So for example, having the power button or the all off button at the bottom in the middle, for example, always having the audio on the right hand side where possible. Now, for my design, of course, we know how lighting and temperature will be controlled. We'll have a look at how the shading and the curtains, the blinds and the curtains will be controlled in a moment. But we'll have a look at how these are going to be controlled, the different operating modes. So if I head back into Loxone config, I prepared some config earlier for this. And you can see here, I've got my modes and I've got a radio button for meeting and presentation and then all off. So for meeting and presentation, I'm just going to switch them around so it's the same order as my radio buttons block. I can add some text and just say meeting and then add presentation like so. And of course, all off. Okay. Now, we don't need to add any other text there. They're quite clearly curtains. That's quite clearly a blind. And then we've got our different icons, which again are quite self-explanatory. So I would only label these icons here. Now, lighting icon, I don't need to do anything to. The temperature icon, I'm going to go for set temperature again, like I did before. Don't need to change anything. Now, for play and pause, we're happy with. For volume, we need to adjust whether it's doing volume up or whether we're doing that value select like before. So we'll do value select. I'm going to do between 0 and 100 at pulse increments of 3 with a unit of a percentage. So just to recap there, I went there quite quickly. So again, like before, a minimum of 0% volume, 100%, and then it's a unit of course, a percentage, and the increments is 3. This, of course, can be changed if necessary. Now, for our different operating modes in the room, you can see that we've got radio buttons block. Now, with the radio buttons, you have the option. With the radio buttons, we'll go for the A option. You can see we can go for previous input or next input by default. Now, if I was doing this, this would mean that on the radio buttons block, it would always go up and down on the radio buttons. So this means that if I was on the meeting mode already, I could use the arrows to go to presentation, which I don't really want to happen when I'm using the radio buttons block. So in my case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go for radio buttons, and this time I'm going to go for the input being input 1 for my meeting mode, and the command is set. And we're just going to be pulsing that. So we're pulsing input 1 to be set for meeting mode. And then nothing's going to be nothing's going to be used for the arrows, but when we press meeting mode, we can just display meeting on as text underneath. And then again, same again for the presentation. So we'll do radio buttons, input 2, set, and pulse. So you can see that the predefined functions are a little bit more limited than what you can do if you go and create your own command. Because of course, if the predefined functions had everything in there, it would be very quick to be a very long list. Just notice something. Tyrion, if you're watching, do you want to screenshot that? Then we've got all off as a power button. Now, like at the moment, by default, it's toggling toggle pulse on the switch function block. But of course, we want to turn everything off in the room. So this time we're going to build a command ourselves. So we're going to be doing set, open brackets. We want to turn the lighting off. So LICO, semicolon, off, semicolon, pulse, close bracket, ampersands. We want to turn the audio off. So set, AP, semicolon, off, pulse, close bracket. And we can do another AND block, and we need to turn off the operating modes. So this time it's going to be set, I think it's RB for radio buttons. Yeah, RB. RB, and then we want to pulse the off, close brackets. So now every time I leave the room, I press the all off button, and that will turn off the lights and the audio and reset the operating modes that I had active. If you wanted to, you could also pulse off on the intelligent room controller to cancel any manual overrides that you've done as well. And just to show you again, adding it into Loxone config before we end, we'll copy the config ID, head into Loxone config, meeting room, enter the config ID for that Touch Pureflex, and it will automatically download the template that I've made. And this time with the Touch Pureflex, I've got multiple different we've got multiple of the same function block. So the API connector, we've got lighting, audio, intelligent room controller, and then our modes for the radio buttons. Remember as well, we've got our curtains and 2 blinds, which you can see here, my automatic shading function block. Now, with these automatic shading function blocks, you can see it's calling AS toggle pulse. Now, it's really important that we remember that these function blocks are just looking for anything that says AS. It will only listen to anything addressed to an automatic shading block. So if I connect the API connector to curtains, right blind, left blind, what will happen is that if I try and open and close the curtains, the blinds will automatically start opening and closing. So this is just something you need to bear in mind when making this design. So in fact, I'm going to make an adjustment to my blind icon. For my blind icon, you'll notice that I've got 2 shading central function blocks here. One for everything, so that in the app, the customer can open everything and close everything if they want to. But I've also got one just for blinds, which is hidden from the app, so that I can only control the 2 blinds. So that is one way of doing it, and that's when your command for your function block, sorry, your command for your icon is now addressing automatic shading central rather than automatic shading. Again, it's the same toggle input. Press save. And now if I go back to Loxone config, I can just update my configuration. And you can see now, if I have a look for my shading function block, my shading one, there you go. It's now looking at automatic shading central for opening and closing. So now if I just connect my API connector to the automatic shading function block just for blinds, that will only talk to the blinds, and this one will only talk to the curtains with no confusion. Now, that is one way of doing it. There's one other way that it can be done. So if I reset this back to how it was with just normal automatic shading, and then update this in Loxone config, when you've got your API connectors connected to the respective function blocks, let me just add another one. So when you've got all your API connectors connected to the respective function blocks, you can go back into configure a button assignment, and you can see here the shading button. What I can do is I can make sure it only ever talks to my right and left blind, but doesn't talk to curtains. And then I can make sure that my other icon, which is this one, which I want to be a toggle, I can make sure that this icon is only ever talking to curtains. And then we can check that this works in just a moment once I save in to the mini server. So let's save in. And of course, because I've already got a template running on my Touch Pureflex next to me, we can use simulation. So for this one, you can see I've clicked on the API connector for the blinds, but if I click on the curtains icon, you can see that all of them responded. That's an epic fail, isn't it? I'll report that as a bug tomorrow morning. So for the time being, what you're going to want to do is do what we did in the first place, connect it to the automatic shading central function block, like I did initially. But what you will be able to do once I've reported that bug is make sure that you're only talking to specific function blocks, even if you've got multiple of the same. So a really, really powerful function. And for the time being, this one will just have to go for the shading central, exactly as I suspected initially. Okay, perfect. That is how to design and commission a Touch Pureflex in an hour, exactly.